So, speaking of grace, my most valuable grace has happened in the last few years for me is the recognition that the voices in my head that have been tormenting me for 54 years are not really me. I always thought they were me. And I'd been hearing about the observer, the watcher, the real self, but still the voices were so loud, they always convinced me that what they were telling me was the truth. Even when in my head I knew they weren't true, in my cells I still believed them. And then just a little bit less than a couple of years ago, Angelina and I were reading a book called The Untethered Soul. Has anybody ever read that book? It's unbelievable. And the message got very clear. And so I remember one day I was meditating and I could hear those voices and they were saying things like, maybe you've heard this before, they were saying things like, meditating? What an unproductive use of time. Anybody ever hear those voices saying, don't you have things you could be doing? Isn't there some gigs to book? Isn't there something you could be doing, changing the oil or something? And I would hear the voices and I realized, oh my goodness, there are those crazy neurotic voices going again, but I know it's not me. You know, and then I could hear the voice, a much more realistic voice that was very quiet, but when I got quiet, got very loud. It's often called the still small voice of your higher self. And the still small voice said, I am the one here all the time, mirroring your true divinity. Don't listen to those guys. They're full of it. And so I decided to write a song about that. This is called Voices in My Head. It's also on the new CD, which is called It's Not the End. And so I'm going to be the voice of Armand, not listening to the neurotic voices. And Angelina's going to be the voice of my higher power, reminding me what's real. Which is interesting because for over 14 years, more than any other human being in the world, she has reminded me of what's real. And whenever I act in that insane person, I name him Richard, or Dick for short, but Richard, because he is so full of it. And he is always trying to convince me that I am not good enough. And no matter how much work I do, he still tries, sometimes even harder, to convince me that there is still something wrong with me. And I'm getting better at not listening to him. This is called Voices in My Head.
Voices ever sound like static going on and it just doesn't stop.
So I was meditating and I was feeling so good. I was in that state of bliss. And then my inner roommate came in. I said, what the heck are you doing? I hear the voices in my head, but I'm not listening. They try and tell me that I'm not okay. I hear the voices in my head, but I'm not listening. They try and tell me that I'm not okay. I hear the voices in my head, but I'm not listening. The silence offers me another way.
In the space behind the voices, pure awareness comforts me. In the space behind the voices, I am love and I am free.
I hear the voices in my head, but I'm not listening. They try and tell me that I'm not okay. listening. The silence offers me another way.
In the space behind the voices, your awareness comforts me. In the space behind the voices, I am love and I am free.
I hear the voices in my head, but I'm not listening. They try and tell me that I'm not okay. I hear the voices in my head, but I'm not listening. The silence offers me another way. I hear the voices
Behind the voices,
they try and tell me that we've got a messed up PA. I hear the voices in my head, but I'm not listening. The silence offers me another way. I hear the voices in my head. I hear the voices in my head, but I'm not listening.
I am loved and I am free.
My goodness, I hear him right now. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there's so many people here that have never seen this before.
What
that
happened
weird
with
PA
that?
sound
Oh,
happens. Every time I
And
get
you know
close
what?
to
This is
Angelina,
being
weird stuff
videotaped, and now it's always
Nobody's
going to
not
be
the end.
there.
It's
Oh my
gonna work
gosh!
out
All
okay.
times on the day I'm having a bad hair.
I hope they don't find out I got these boots and
Okay,
magazines.
I just hope that they still like us.
It's okay, all is well. I hear that it's
Okay,
serious.
just breathe. You get a deep, deep breath.
It's not the end. Everything's okay. I am one with God.
Well, that was a first.
Don't get too close to me, honey. That was the codependent alarm going off.